Hello, and welcome to Uncertain Forecast, a podcast about climate justice brought to you by the California Center for Ethics and Policy, or CCEP, in the College of Letters, Arts, and Social Sciences at Cal Poly Pomona. My name is Alex Madba, and as director of CCEP, and on behalf of the CCEP Faculty Fellows co-organizing Uncertain Forecast, namely Nicole Lambrou, Brady Collins, and Corey Aragon, we are pleased to bring you our third panel on climate justice. First, I'd like to encourage you to visit our website, and we're putting the link for that in the chat now, where you can sign up for our mailing list and stay in the know about all our upcoming events. You can also follow us on the socials. We've been thrilled to offer a full lineup of events this spring. You can see the recording of our first two events, our January panel on California wildfires and climate justice, and our February panel on power, water, and the Golden State at the following links. And please mark down the date now for our final panel on Friday, April 15th from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m., again on Pacific time, which will be Soil, Food, and Justice, the Ecosystems of California. It will explore the effects of soil depletion on California's ecosystems and food production. And don't forget to catch up on season 1 of CCEP's podcast, Securing Justice, which focused on California housing insecurity, and which you can find anywhere you get your podcasts. Today's panel is Just Air: California Health and the Ethics of Repair. Our moderator is Nicole Lambrou, whose work focuses on the politics of climate resilience and how they inform urban environmental transformations. Nicole is an architect, urban designer, and researcher with experience in designing and building initiatives for public space. Without further ado, let me hand the virtual mic over to Nicole.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to our esteemed panelists for taking the time to join us today. I want to start, as I always do with these sessions, with a brief framing of the various aspects of, in this particular case, air that we've been talking about in our offline conversations and our respective research, and also with our students. There is, of course, a clear link between air pollution and increased risk for morbidity and mortality, which have led to a number of policies and standards over several decades at this point regarding toxic air pollutants in the US. And environmental justice groups have been concerned about such toxicities for several decades now, right? Originally relating air pollution to industrial and other land uses. Extractive processes of land use. So a particular concern, as with, again, our previous discussions in this series on wildfires and water before air, is the large concentration of populations of racial and ethnic minorities living in proximity to these toxicities. So in this particular case, that would manifest in living or working close to or in industries that are linked to increased air pollution levels, including significant exposure to indoor air pollution. So as our CCEP topic this year is about climate justice, I want to also make the point here that while air pollution may be a strictly environmental justice issue for some, our framing in terms of climate justice really asks us to think about the multiple and intersecting exposures to risk and to understand these as both systemic and interrelated. So in this case, air toxicities as a function of extractive fossil fuel driven processes and dependencies. So each of our panelists today bring a different perspective to bear on this topic. We have about 15 minutes or so for each panelist to present an aspect of their work on air with us, followed by questions that they can pose to each other or take from the audience. So please, audience, thank you for being here, but please also post your questions in the chat, as you hear these presentations, and we'll moderate those as they come in. So with that, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our first panelist, Dr. Bo Liu. Bo is a project director at the Luskin Center for Innovation at UCLA, focusing on transportation electrification and urban analytics. And his research interests include regional and cross-sectoral understanding of global environmental change and mitigation strategies, and integrated analysis of technology, infrastructure, and public policy. Dr. Liu received his PhD in urban planning from UCLA in 2020. He also holds a Master of Public Administration from Syracuse, an MS in Environmental Science from SUNY ESF, and a BS in Environmental Science from Beijing Normal University. And I also want to say that prior to coming to UCLA, Bo did work as a research associate at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and graduate scholar at the New York State Assembly, and has published a number of well-regarded peer-reviewed articles in journals. And with that, welcome, Bo. Thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nicole, for the nice introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see so many faces on a Friday afternoon. Okay, I'm gonna start sharing my slides. So today I'm just gonna quickly talk about some of the findings from a number of projects we've been conducted at the UCLA Luskin Center for Innovation under this theme towards equitable transition to sustainable transportation. As probably like many of you are well aware, right? Like in both the US and California, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for 90% at the national level. And then for the state, it's about 41%. And then the percentages are increasing over time. Besides its contribution to climate change, transportation also negatively affects air quality, especially in urban areas. According to American Lawn Association, California has 8 of the 10 most populated polluted US cities in terms of ozone pollution, and 7 of the 10 most polluted US cities in terms of particulate matter. So in California, transportation is the major source for a number of air pollutants, such as carbon monoxide and NOx. So in recent years, the development in advanced biofuels, renewable electricity, and also electric vehicle technologies outlines a foreseeable future for sustainable transportation. However, compared to biofuel production and consumption, the renewable electricity combined with electric vehicles pathway provides much greater air quality benefits. So let's go back a little bit. Let's first take a quick look at the light duty vehicle sector. So the maps here show the number of plug-in electric vehicles, which are battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles combined per 1,000 households across neighborhoods in the state of California. Here, neighborhoods, I mean census tracts to be more specific. As of late 2018, the adoption rates are in general low across the state, as you can see from the maps, right? The colors are pretty light, which actually means the adoption is generally low. And then also, you can also see some kind of like darker spots, right? So those are kind of like higher adoption areas. They are not surprising, right? So they're usually concentrated in like the Bay Area and also along the coast, right? So those like high income neighborhoods. And then this is kind of like 2018 data, so it's a little bit outdated. But according to the latest CEC statistics, by the end of 2020, so the jet stock or population has been increased to around 2.2% of the overall vehicle population in the state. So now let's take a look at adoption across different groups of neighborhoods, right? So if we rank those census tracts by median household income, so there would be like 4 groups here. So like the top, the highest income quartile, all the way to the lowest income quartile. You can see the adoption varies by different groups, right? So pretty much like 2/3 of the adoption took place in the highest income group. And then the lowest income group, right? There's only like 5 to 6% of the total vehicle sales. And then we can also take a look at how adoption varies between disadvantaged communities and other communities, right? So 92% of the PEVs were sold in the non-disadvantaged communities, whereas there's only 8%. We're talking about like the equitable transition here, right? So we probably have to take a look at what are the available policy support for new clean vehicle purchase in the state. So a few of the programs actually touched upon the equity aspect, which I'm going to quickly talk about. So first, there is the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, right, which is funded by the California Air Resources Board, and it's the state's flagship funding program for promoting clean passenger vehicle adoption. So it offers up to $7,000 rebate for the purchase or lease of a new and eligible zero emission vehicle. And then there are income caps for different types of filers, right? Single filers and joint filers. There are different income caps. In addition, there is the California Clean Fuel Reward, which is the California's newest incentive program in this space. The program is funded by the sale of electric utility low carbon fuel standard credits, which are generated by the use of electricity as a transportation fuel. So this program offers up to $750 rebate at the point of sale for the purchase of a new and eligible plug-in electric vehicle. And then there's also the Clean Cars for All program. So in contrast to the CVRP, right, the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, this program is specifically designed to get lower income Californians into cleaner technology vehicles. This program provides qualifying individuals living in participating air districts. So there are currently 3 air districts participating in this program, namely South Coast area, San Joaquin Valley, the Bay Area, and then the Sacramento area. So eligible participants or eligible applicants can actually get up to $9,500 grant toward the purchase of a new or used ZEV after retiring an odor polluting vehicle. So the requirement here is really to promote the retirement of those highly polluting vehicles and then switching to this newer and cleaner technology. So unlike the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, these funds are made available only to those, right, who retire an odor polluting vehicle, and then recipients also have the option to get alternative mobility funding, for example, like transit passes or e-bikes in some program areas. So those kind of like how the different types of incentives offered through this program. So this program is a promising one that offers the low income or moderate income households substantial resources to replace a polluting personal car with a clean vehicle or other clean transportation options. However, complex application processes, confined geographic scope, funding shortfalls, and lack of awareness limit the program's reach. And then lastly, there's the statewide Clean Vehicle Assistance Program and the Regional Driving Clean Assistance Program. These are pilot programs funded by the proceeds of the California Cap and Trade Program. Both programs provide grants of up to $5,000 for low-income households towards the purchase of new or used hybrids, electric vehicles, or fuel cell electric vehicles. As you may notice here, currently policy support for clean vehicle purchases in California is focused on rebates or grants to buyers. These rebates or grants have different vehicle eligibility, right? As you can see, some are open to ZEV, some are open to like plug-in electric vehicles only. some are open to like hybrids, right? And then these incentives are often distributed at different stages of sale, for example, after the sale, right? The rebates, or at the point of sale sometimes. And also some programs may require prior approval. So there's some sort of application process there. However, low interest government funded or guaranteed loans could play an important role in accelerating vehicle transitions, which are not represented, right, in these programs. So here we kind of like, based on our studies through a number of projects, we have a number of recommendations for a more equity-based agenda. Here and just quickly list a few of those. First, expand the scope of the Clean Cars for All program. Although the current geographic scope covers much of California's population, right? Like 4 air districts, as you just mentioned, this program should be expanded to encompass priority households and communities across the state, right? Maybe think about including other air districts or those priority households from other air districts, right? And then second, provide adequate and stable funding. So budget allocations that do not meet program demands lead to long wait lists, right? That undermine the effectiveness of the program. So really adequate and stable funding would be essential in offering those incentives. And then expand CVAP or DCAP, right, the assistance program, and consolidate with probably the expanded Clean Cars for All program, having multiple overlapping programs, right? Those 2 programs are kind of like targeted towards like low income households, but then having multiple overlapping programs can confuse, right, those seeking clean vehicle grants, and redundant program administration increases overhead unnecessarily, right? Because there's like costs on the administrative side. A revised Clean Cars for All program could include, right, lower value grants for income qualified buyers who are not scraping an odor polluting vehicle as a tier within their grant structure, right? That could also work. And then invest in awareness campaigns, right? Priority communities often contain many hard to reach households that cannot benefit from the programs if they're not aware of their existence, right? So this is really important outreach and awareness raising. Examine alternative fueling incentives and alternative transportation vouchers. Installing chargers is often impossible for like renters, right? Especially if they live in multifamily homes. Vouchers to cover charging at public charging stations could be offered instead of incentives for installing chargers, right? That could be something the policymakers should think about. And then not all priority households are well served by transit, right? So access to transit has always been an issue in many areas. So vouchers to use on-demand or zero-emission mobility as service options, if they are available, right, might offer some value to some of those households. And lastly, maybe investigate the feasibility of a clean vehicle loan program, right? As I mentioned, a lot of the current policy support focus on rebates or grants to reduce the upfront costs, but then what about a loan program, right? As a lot of the drivers actually rely on some sort of financing, right, in order to purchase or lease the loan. So that would be important aspect of the incentivization process as well. So we've kind of like talked about, I've kind of talked about the light duty sector for quite a bit. And then, so what I wanted to what I wanted to mention here is that passenger-centric travel in private and shared modes is only one part, right, of the broader transportation system. Public and commercial transportation, such as public service and transit fleets, right, freight activities, right, goods movement and other commercial operations generate significant vehicle traffic and also air pollution, right? So because of the common use of heavier vehicles among these modes, the transition to clean technology for those vehicles is particularly important for reducing pollution burdens, right? So while freight operations are clearly a priority target, fleet vehicles that operate within or near residential areas, such as what you've seen, what you're seeing on this map here, right? Like the transit services, the bus yards, taking LA County as an example, right? The majority of the bus yards are actually within the disadvantaged communities. As you can see, the darker blue actually represents those communities, right? Yeah, focusing on those also offer an underappreciated opportunity to deliver early benefits of clean vehicle transition directly to priority communities. So this is some analysis we've done for the LA County transportation electrification blueprint. So as you can see, if we are having all the majority of the transit agencies transition to battery electric buses, so what happens in terms of daily emissions change, right? As you can see in those charts, we will see emissions change in both near term and longer term from 2025 all the way to 2040, right? As you can see, there are some changes here. So what I wanted to quickly mention here is that with the transition to battery electric buses in LA County, in the near term, there might be increased emissions in particulate matter. And so this is really because the electric vehicles have added vehicle weight due to the battery packs, right? They have to carry a lot of heavy battery packs in order to satisfy the range requirements for their service, right, or operations in general. So this is kind of like some near-term negative impacts. That portion of emissions actually come from the brake wear and tire wear. So it's not actually from the tailpipe emissions, but from the brake wear and tire wear. So as the technology improves, we believe that the vehicle weight issue is going to get sorted out, right, with lower weight of the vehicle, and then in the longer term, the emissions from the brake wear or tire wear would become less significant. So that, as you can see, right, the projections here show that in the longer term, there are net benefits in all the four criteria pollutants shown here. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Bo. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And I'd be interested in hearing in the Q&A afterwards your thoughts on why there's such an enormous discrepancy. I know you mentioned some reasons, but that was just a huge kind of disparity in the adoption of EVs by different populations. All right, so I want to now introduce Paloma Giottonini. Dr. Giottonini is an assistant professor in urban studies and planning at CSU Northridge. And although her research is interdisciplinary by nature, her areas of expertise are energy efficiency policy, urban sustainability, and housing equity. Her background and professional experience in architecture and green building inform her research perspective. Her work expands to her home country, Mexico, where she investigated energy efficiency policies for social housing. And previously, I should also note she was a postdoc fellow at the UCLA Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, where she collaborated in an experiment to motivate households to reduce electricity consumption through the participation of teenagers as energy conservation stewards. Earned her degree in urban planning from UCLA and holds a master's degree in urban and environmental planning from Arizona State and a degree in architecture from the Monterey Institute of Technology and Higher Education. Thank you so much, Paloma, for being here. I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be part of this panel. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, great discussion with Dr. Liu. I share that perspective. You know, it's like we have to understand what's happening with all of these policies and programs that we're putting in place, and where these resources are going to actually make sure that they are equitable as we want them. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit related to that. I'm going to present this research. Sorry, this always happens to me. Okay, yeah, so we are exploring how we can take control of our health in our homes. And what we found is that there is a lot of research saying that if you live close to a polluted area, we're going to have health problems, right? If your house has the wrong conditions, then we're going to have health problems. And then there are some behaviors that also create more health problems. What we don't have is a comprehensive analysis of the interactions between the three of them. And this is one of the motivations for this analysis, because some policies are coming, some top-down approaches are coming, but they tend to be slow in providing, you know, the community a way to address these issues. So we want to understand what are the tools, what are the resources that we have to mitigate these negative effects. And as Dr. Liu was presenting too, the location of housing sometimes determines, you know, low-income sections of the city usually have worse environmental conditions, and that kind of puts us in a difficult situation, you know, where we cannot change the environment. And talking about equity, I mean, the air, I think, is one of the most equitable resources. It doesn't matter who you are, is going to get you, is going to affect you. So how can we mitigate these effects as we wait for policies and programs and for things to change, right? That's one of the goals of this research. A little bit of background: we spend 90% of our lives indoors. With the pandemic, we probably spend 120% of our lives indoors. And this includes obviously our house and office, school, etc. In some cases, we have 2 to 5 times more indoor pollutants than what we have outdoors. So our homes are a source of pollution and of health symptoms. And the common indoor pollutants, I'm sure you guys are aware with those. And what we know is that since we spend so much time indoors, so this the air quality indoor air quality can affect our health. And this health and indoor air quality can be affected by these outdoor sources where we live, living close to a high traffic highway, a high traffic road. We also have some indoor sources like the construction materials in our homes, sometimes the paintings, the furnishings, and all other materials, and obviously some behaviors. Amongst them, you know, smoking indoors or having a pet can affect our health. And as I said before, many studies have identified these pollutants and their sources, and they have calculated the incidence of health symptoms as a result of the exposure to these pollutants. But we don't have a lot of knowledge about the interactions. So what happens between the outdoor pollutants, indoor pollutants, and our behaviors that can affect our health? And how to mitigate these negative effects is even more rare, the research. So we want to explore that. Also, what we know is that most of the top-down approaches with governmental regulation are addressing issues of air quality and pollution. But we know that we can have a crucial role in improving or worsening our indoor air quality. But what we found is that there's still a lot of misinformation. We tend to believe that having an air filter is going to improve our air quality. Our study shows no difference. And some of our household items, or cleaning products can also worsen our indoor air quality. Actually, just storing some of these chemicals inside our home can worsen our air inside. So our research questions are basically two. First, we want to know what are the contributions of outdoor, indoor, and behavioral sources of pollutants to our health symptoms. And the second question is, what are the behaviors that could mitigate these negative effects? So if we're stuck in our housing situation, we cannot move, and this is the case for a lot of low-income communities, what can we do to mitigate these negative effects? Okay, so the hypothesis is obviously we live in a clean environment here with the green circle, and we have a clean indoor environment too, and we have good behaviors, then we're going to have good health. On the opposite, if we live in a bad outdoor environment with a bad indoor environment too, and bad behaviors, then we're probably going to have bad health. But what happens in between, and this green here and this green red here are guesses. So what happens in between? Can we mitigate a negative outdoor environment? How? And how do we get this information to most people so we can take care of our health? The study that we conducted, we used a private company survey who has this series of questions about indoor home conditions, external environmental characteristics, where people live, if there's a factory, if there's a coffee roasting facility, gas stations, all these things, and some of the occupants' behavior. Big disclaimer, all the health symptoms are self-reported, so it's not a scientific account of health symptoms, but it's a good start, we think, for this type of analysis. We have about 86,000 participants who completed these surveys between 2017 and 2020. So we conducted a negative binomial regression model because our dependent variable is the count of active health symptoms, and we have it's over dispersed. So we have a large amount of people who have reported zero symptoms. So this is going to take care of that. This is our independent variables are a set of demographic characteristics that were part of the surveys. And as I said before, the conditions of the indoor-outdoor environments, the maintenance behaviors, and regular behaviors. We separated maintenance behaviors, those white in a little bit. So these are our 5 models in the regression analysis. And I'm just gonna go briefly here. So our results show that in this study with these data, we find that demographics help explain 7% of the variability in the active health symptoms. It seems like a very small percentage, but it's significant in our results. We found that indoor or building characteristics don't have much of capacity to explain active health symptoms in the population. The outdoor environment explains 3% of the variability of the health symptoms, and maintenance. This was an unexpected finding that the maintenance of the building explains 14% of the variability in health symptoms. What are the what are the, the effects or the consequences of these results. What we also found is that for those who rent, so renters who are usually lower income, the lower income population, and those who live near highways or near industrial areas or farms are reporting more active health symptoms. And we're also finding that the presence of leaks, odors, and surface dust are significantly related to a higher number of health symptoms. Similar analyses have explored these factors, but we also were able to inspect their interactions, as I said before. So what are the consequences of these results on terms of equity? So we're seeing more health symptoms in the lower income community, as expected. Those who rent have usually less opportunity to make changes in their own homes, and they are usually located in more less favorable locations. And I'm going to go back to the issue of maintenance because I think that's an important one. So after the negative binomial regression model identified these negative outdoor environment and poor maintenance as the precursors of a higher count of health symptoms. We conducted this structural equation modeling to investigate which behaviors could ameliorate the negative effects of these conditions on the count of self-reported health symptoms. Now, the structural equation modeling is always understood or interpreted with a grain of salt, but I think these give us some potential mediators. For example, for the case of maintenance, we found that the presence of leaks is associated with an increase of water stains as expected, and this is associated with an increase in mold, which consequently is associated with an increase in health symptoms. So the more water leaking, the more mold, the more health symptoms, which is somewhat expected. Taking frequent long showers is also associated with an increase in mold. However, if we have a bathroom fan running that exhausts outside, then this will reduce the amount of visible mold in the building. Living in an older home is also associated with having more leaks and therefore with more health symptoms. Now, when we're trying to walk through all of these variables, there's something that we have to be always going back. So we're talking about older homes with a lot of water problems and a lot of maintenance issues. So we're most likely looking at lower income families, right? Lower income households. In terms of personal behaviors, smoking is related with obviously more with an accumulation of surface dust, and this is also related to more health symptoms. Similarly, the presence of carpet in the house is linked to an increase in surface dust and more health symptoms. However, the frequent vacuuming help to mitigate these issues. So more vacuum frequency is related to less symptoms. In terms of the outdoor characteristics, living near a negative outdoor environment is, as expected, associated with an increase in health symptoms, also associated with an increase of dirt on seals, and that's also obviously associated with more health symptoms. Opening windows are open here. Opening windows is associated with fewer symptoms. However, this positive relationship with environmental hazards suggests that participants may not be aware of this outdoor condition and would benefit from more information. If we live close to an environmental hazard like a freeway, it's obviously better to close the windows and reduce that ventilation. But for some, we keep thinking that more ventilation is better, right? We also found that home occupants who live near environmental hazards are more likely to have an air purifier and also report more health symptoms. In this case, this is a circular association. We don't really know if people have an air purifier because they live near environmental hazards, and therefore they had more health symptoms to begin with. So we don't know which came first. So that's why I'm saying that the circular equation modeling is sometimes difficult to disentangle, especially from the source of the data. So in conclusion, what we found is that leaks and frequency of long showers are associated with more health symptoms. Smoking is associated with more health symptoms. The carpet and sofas does, even though that's mitigated with vacuuming. And obviously living near environmental hazard is associated with health symptoms. So these findings, what they highlight is the importance of periodic maintenance and proper ventilation in buildings, but also points to the limitation of renters who, as I said before, they have limited capacity to perform maintenance, to change materials, to change furnishings. And they often depend on the landlord's willingness, skills, and financial capacities to perform these activities. So this talks about, again, what kind of policies and what kind of resources we need to make available so these buildings are kept in proper condition. We still need more research on the interaction between environmental conditions and behavior. It's not completely clear whether we can actually mitigate any of these. And what we propose is to provide more information and increase awareness about these relationships between the quality of outdoor environments and the effects on health, and more ways to provide this information to the public so they can take matters into their hands. Hopefully, with the hope to reduce the number of health symptoms in people living near these environmental hazards or in poor housing conditions. So in a nutshell, it all boils down to the quality of the building and the proper maintenance and some practices. Obviously, for homeowners, maintenance is crucial as well. So they also have to keep their buildings in proper conditions to avoid the negative health effects. This is going to be it from my part, and I'm going to welcome all your questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Paloma. I am absolutely disheartened that my indoor air filters don't work. That was shocking. And I was looking at the audience and everyone's eyes kind of opened up. I mean, that's crazy. In a place like Southern California, where air pollution is a sort of constant, I think about some of those moments where just to bring it back to climate change, where, things become highly concentrated at times of, say, wildfires. Or on extreme heat days. And if we have time in the Q&A, I just want to hear your thoughts on whether you know of any research in that area that looks at these kind of overlaps. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to introduce Naomi White. Naomi, thank you for being here. Naomi is an abolitionist, feminist, artist, educator, working on ideas at the intersection of political ecology and photography. Throughout her work, Naomi addresses an array of complex contemporary issues, questioning dominant ethics and narratives throughout history, and asking how we can shift our focus away from the current racist capitalist model of domination to one of equity and collective voice for the sake of all people, animals, and the planet. I also want to add a few accolades. Winner of the PDN's Object of Desire Award, attended several artist residencies, exhibited throughout North America and Europe, including at the art fairs Scope Miami, Spectrum Miami, Photo LA. Holds an MFA in photography and related media from School of Visual Arts in New York. A post back in photography from the San Francisco Art Institute, a BA in English Lit from San Francisco State, and currently is serving as the faculty chair of photography at the Photo Arts Conservatory at New York Film Academy in LA. We're incredibly fortunate to have her here. Thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was so generous. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Bo and Paloma and Fernando, for sharing your expertise with us. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, And in the 80s, we had smog days, and I was a runner, and I routinely wasn't able to go outside, and meets were canceled. So I'm incredibly grateful for the work you're doing, bringing attention to these matters, and the Clean Air Act, which helped one thing. And of course, we're battling the ocean. But thank you for all the work you do. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to just, hang on, talk about a project I'm doing. So I'm going to go into slideshow called The Myth of Empty Spaces. And sorry, I'm moving and thinking kind of slow. I have the first cold in 2 years, so forgive me if I meander. But this is one of the images from the series, and it's called The Myth of Empty Spaces, based on the title of a Wendy Harding book, who looks at the way settlers really unsaw people in the Americas when they arrived, and the way the white supremacist lens does that. It just unsees people who are not white, and how incredibly, toxic and challenging that is, but also fascinating from a standpoint of, how can they be, sort of people and then also murderous racists. It's something that I'm trying to wrestle with. So in Wendy Harding's book, she looks at this myth of empty spaces, and she says, emptiness is always the product of human decisions, depending on what the objectives are. You would say a place is empty in order to have legal and moral recourse to fill it. In ideological terms, land designed as empty became inscribable. It demanded to be materially claimed and conceptually informed. And she goes on to talk about how these two words, full and empty, keep flip-flopping, which I found really interesting, especially when the settlers wanted to gain more land from the indigenous people. So at first, fullness is associated with corruption because they were coming from overcrowded cities in Europe, and they were so happy to be in this free, empty, virtuous space. And then full becomes associated with civilized, and empty is wild. And so they kind of switch in terms of positive and negative, which is really based on capitalism and how they needed more land and they needed to talk about things differently. And then that kind of continues to be done in more capitalistic terms, progress and underdeveloped, as they needed more resources. So I am really interested in the way that these things can be, I guess, not, the language is not static, and our understanding of each other is not static. And we have a long way to go in terms of understanding and bringing ourselves to a more full and regenerative world. But I, as an artist, strive to do that and to create a future imaginary where there is justice. So that's the goal. So I wanted to begin with this image by Ansel Adams of the Yosemite Valley, because in many ways, this represents some of these challenges. He was definitely an amazing photographer, but he was also working hard to get people out of his frame. There are thousands of indigenous people living in the Yosemite Valley when he is there, and even probably in this image. So he's working really hard to make sure people are not included. And the effect of that is that you think that he discovered Yosemite on his own. And I had a German student who was, can you guys still hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I had a German student a little bit ago who was very upset to learn that Ansel Adams hadn't discovered Yosemite, and then was also shocked to hear that we had actually forcibly removed indigenous people from their ancestral homelands to make the national parks. And her first question was, well, did you give it back? And I was like, oh, no, but yeah, we have not given it back. And she was, raised after World War II. So her understanding is that you understand your history, you face your history and you own it and you learn from it and move on and make sure it doesn't happen again. And the fact that we as America, wave our moral flag and haven't done that was really shocking to her. And that moment, it became more shocking to me because I think these things you just sort of, you're like, yeah, that happened. And yeah, I don't know, it's sort of been normalized to accept that. And so that really helped me see that, it's really wrong. And there's actually an amazing article in the Atlantic that you all might have read by David Trower, an Indigenous writer, about land back and reparations and giving the tribes back the Yosemite or national parks. And in it, he describes the scene of murderous, racist white men going to Yosemite to kill Indians. Like that's what they say in the article. And that's when they discover Yosemite. And when they discover Yosemite, I mean, the first white people to discover Yosemite, they're like on their knees, they're crying, it's so beautiful. And now we definitely have to go kill all the people who live here because we want it for ourselves. Like these two things are, it's really kind of mind blowing how they can live in the same person. So I'm interested in figuring those things out. So not that that's figure outable, but that's sort of some of the themes that I'm working with. So I went on this residency in 2019 and I went to make work, but I also went to research the Anthropocene. I was going to teach a class on ecological activism in the fall. When I was doing this research, actually, firstly, you get a studio. Everyone gets a studio, and there's very little in it. My studio had a bed, a sink, a desk, and a stack of Life magazines from the 50s. And these magazines were just left by somebody, I guess, and they really read like some kind of cult. They were just about white men, and there were no people of color. And if there was a woman, she was a celebrity or she was cleaning something. It was a national magazine, and it was just about white men. So it was kind of the starting of wanting to work in collage and thinking about how things were represented and how they have changed. So I ordered a bunch more Life magazines and also National Geographic. So this is sort of looking at the way that we have, changed over time, our understanding of race and gender and the environment and our treatment of animals through national magazines. So I started thinking about three things in this research. One is that everything is about race and racism, starting with our white supremacist beginnings. And two, the only way to fight climate change is through collectively and particularly registering people to vote. As we could see with the Obama campaign in Georgia in 2020, there's no such thing as the individual carbon footprint. That was an ad campaign by BP Oil. And the third thing was that rocks are recording devices. Geologists read gases trapped in rocks to understand where we are in our current ecological era. And in this moment of misinformation and the rise of visible white supremacy, I was so excited about this. And while I was there, the 1619 Project came out, and these two things were just like, hooray, like, oh my God, there is, something tangible that we can look to in terms of truth, whatever that is. So metaphorically, I started playing with this idea, and I was obsessed with rocks anyway. They had these beautiful purple and red rocks in the middle of a very brown and green landscape. probably not glacial erratics, probably pulled in and curated, but they were still, they held me. And so I made these pictures of them and then started tearing and burning into them and putting in different images. So I was thinking about, you know, how to tell these stories and then also kind of think to the future. So they're sort of doing both of those things. And so I created these categories, which are sort of silly, but it was kind of the lens I was looking through at all the images I was finding. And yeah, so anyway, yeah, apathy, ignorance, racism was, you know, often white people in leisure in the 50s, or white people smoking, or just sort of like a apathetic element. And then, yeah, toxic energy, sacrifice sites, freeways, and, you know, Asian people having to eat a picnic, you know, under electrical wires and things like that. And then love and healing and this persistence. So I'll just share with you some of these images. There's always some kind of persistence and resistance. And then there's like themes of communication here. This kitchen is on fire. The Amazon was also on fire when I was at this residency. So I was thinking a lot about, you know, what are they clearing it for? Cattle, and the whole way we treat animals and factory farming. I think 33% of the planet is dedicated to cattle grazing or animal habitat. I mean, animals for eating. So yeah, it was also thinking formally about rocks and photographs and how to make photographs become more sculptural. Often a photograph is very frustrating. It's just a surface. So you're constantly like trying to get deeper into it and you can't. So I'm layering these, and I was thinking about them as mats and really trying to make them go deeper physically. And you can't really tell that because it's again a flat photograph, but they come out, you know, about half an inch or an inch. So these are, yeah, just images of us domesticating animals. And here in the bottom, animals are starting to fight back. There's an image on the left of a man with a snake bite, and then on the right, jellyfish scars. But yeah, just trying to think about the way that we treat animals, and then of course the reciprocity, like, you know, losing biodiversity and the way that they help us be able to breathe and live in this world. You know, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. But I'd love to hear from you guys. If you want to put in the chat, you know, what these, like we could take this image, what this image reminds you of, or what it makes you think about, or some of the themes that you see happening here. How do you make meaning from this?
Thank you, Naomi. I want to give them the opportunity to digest these images. I think someone dropped a link in the chat with your work.
Oh, okay, great. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we concluding here? I just want to be respectful.
Yeah, I just want to just go to the, yeah, this was just an important slide for me in terms of imagining the future. It's from Just Transition Principles, and I find it really hopeful in ways that we can change the way we run our systems. And this wonderful quote to end with, because Rebecca Solnit always gives me hope. There may always be tigers, but sometimes there are strawberries, and it's really important to, you know, take joy when you can find it, and take care in people you love. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi. What a wonderful presentation and fascinating work. Thank you. And I just also really appreciate the reference to Adams and how much time you spent on that and Yosemite. I always begin any course related to climate change with some of the work that environmental historian William Cronin has done. I'm sure you're familiar with on wilderness, that kind of how the image of wilderness is just that, right? It's just an image that's been constructed and then institutionalized by a number of environmental laws, such as the Wilderness Act, and the sort of damage it's done to erase the histories of these places that we think of as worthy of preservation, as closer to nature, and the power implications in these acts. Thank you so much. And I wish we had more time. I want to hand it over now to Fernando Navarrete. I'm going to introduce him. He's a public works deputy, serves as liaison to the various bureaus within the Public Works Department for the city. His day-to-day duties include things like managing projects related to sidewalk improvements, median improvements, street lighting, beautification projects, and working directly with the LA Department of Transportation. Southern District. Fernando also monitors the weekly Board of Public Works Commission of the City of Los Angeles, provides relevant information to the team, has more than 6 years of experience in freight transportation and logistics experience in the private sector. And with that brings a unique kind of perspective in mitigating freight transportation impacts in the LA Harbor. And in addition, Fernando continues to serve as the deputy for the Wilmington community. Graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, Marketing, candidate of a Master's of Public Administration from Cal State Dominguez Hills. And I also want to say I've had the pleasure of working with Fernando on a number of different initiatives in over the past few years in the Port neighborhood of Wilmington, where he primarily works. So thank you for being here, Fernando. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Alex, for inviting me. And definitely, it's going to be a little bit difficult to follow the presentations, but nonetheless, kudos to the rest of the panelists, Paloma, Dr. Bo, and Naomi. Amazing presentations. It's great to see the diverse amounts of perspective. So I'll definitely sprinkle in my 2 cents here. So as Nicole mentioned, I do serve on my day-to-day job here in the city of Los Angeles. Aside from the, my experience with the city and even in the private sector, I'm actually one of very few, deputies in the entire city who actually lives in the community they represent. So here in Wilmington, I've lived here since I migrated from Mexico at age 6. I'm also very open about my status. So I am a DACA recipient. I am undocumented as my status. To shout out to all my undocumented folks in academia. Kudos to you all. And a lot of my experience and really who I am today was shaped really by living here in this community of Wilmington, right? And super proud of this community and the changes that we're seeing. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done, specifically talking about this topic about air quality. So definitely, I've been sort of a spectator from the inside out. Obviously in my early childhood, viewing just, what was surrounding us, right? Major sources like the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, but also some of our more stationary sources that are really out there, right? In terms of air quality and air pollution, like the 4 refineries that surround the Wilmington community. So as I was listening to Dr. Bo and him mentioning, California having some of the most impacted cities, LA is definitely up there, and Wilmington specifically is one of those communities that is burdened by poor air quality and the issues that surround it, right? So let me go ahead and try to share my screen if you all can see it. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. So Wilmington, we coined the term here in Wilmington, heart of the harbor, and I'll go into detail as to why we consider ourselves as part of this harbor community, why we coined the term heart of the harbor. But Wilmington, just a little bit about the community. We're about 52,000 residents as of the last census. probably by, now that the numbers are out, it has increased significantly. So we're probably closer to 55,000 and not 56,000 residents. Obviously, because of, as I mentioned, the various statuses that we have in this community, a lot of folks felt unsafe to come out and actually participate in the census. So I think our recollections more in the 55 to 60,000 folks who actually live in the community. Again, the folks who were uncounted. But yeah, as I mentioned, Coin, heart of the harbor, and I will show you why in this map. So here's sort of a map of the city of Los Angeles. So it is a humongous city, as you all may know. And for all of y'all who live in the city know the dimensions of the city of LA. So we go as far north as Simi Valley, and actually Wilmington and San Pedro are the furthest area south. So as you can see there, our region is the LA Harbor. So a little bit about the history of Wilmington. We were annexed into the city of Los Angeles in 1906, followed by our counterparts over in San Pedro in 1907. And at the time, the city of Los Angeles in the early 1900s were looking for a seaport. The city, like any other major city in the nation, needs a functioning seaport in order to make it that economic viable city as it is, right? When you discuss the New Yorks of the world, Chicago, all have functioning ports. Obviously, if the city of Los Angeles wanted to be competitive in that way, considering that we have the Pacific Ocean here in our backyard, we needed a seaport. So with that, they explored at the time in the early 1900s. The city of Los Angeles was looking at two ports. One was the Santa Monica Bay. Interestingly enough, if you drive north on Pacific Coast Highway, you'll see a large sign that says Port Los Angeles. That gives you a brief description. If you do a simple search of Port Los Angeles and enter in Santa Monica, you can see that Santa Monica was actually a runner-up to being the Port of Los Angeles. What I joke around with people is too bad they didn't take LA for its promise, because Wilmington would have been a much different community, and I at least would have had a beachfront waterfront in my backyard. But that's neither here nor there. It was annexed in 1906, followed by San Pedro because of its deep shores. Wilmington did have a short life of being its own municipality for about 4 years before then. Obviously, the attraction of joining a larger municipality like the city of LA was at the time was, sort of getting the benefits of a municipality like Los Angeles. Unfortunately, and arguably to this day, the city of Los Angeles hasn't met up to that promise, unfortunately. But nonetheless, we are annexed into the city, and today, between the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach, which is known as the San Pedro Bay Port or the sister ports, is the largest port complex in the entire nation, and one of the top ports in the entire world. 40% of our product that goes anywhere in the nation comes through these sister ports. And as you all saw in the news, when we had that bottleneck issue in the port, was because most of our freight either runs through our oceans or through our freight, whether it's through trains or through mobile sources like diesel trucks, which is an issue in itself here in the harbor. So that's sort of a brief history of Wilmington. And the reason why Wilmington is named Wilmington is actually because of what we consider the man, the father of the Port of Los Angeles, which is Phineas Banning. Phineas Banning was migrated here from Wilmington, Delaware. So sort of a low-hanging fruit for him, decided to name this community after his hometown of Wilmington, Delaware. And the reason why you even see here this sliver of shoestring, which is we like to call here, that connects the harbor to South Central LA, as we sort of call the shoestring area, or the Harbor Gateway as it's officially known. Part of what the California charter and the city charter says is that no boundary within the city, or really any municipality in the state of California, can be detached from its boundaries. So in order for the city of LA to access both Wilmington and San Pedro as the San Pedro Bay and take advantage of its ports, it had to make that connection between the two regions. So the city also annexed the Harbor Gateway, which is the community sort of that runs through the middle through the 110 freeway, sort of neighbors to Gardena, both Gardena, Compton, and other municipalities around. So that's why we see this interesting little sliver. So sort of a little history of Wilmington, primarily a Latino community. About 86% Latino who live in this community, first generation immigrants, and by far a significant amount of monolingual Spanish speakers that live in this community. So in terms of environmental impacts, Wilmington is not different than any other community, but we are definitely by far burdened by a lot of it. So as I mentioned in my earlier statements, we are surrounded by 4 of the major refineries, not only here in the region, but in the world. So Phillips 66 to the west, we have Warren Resources to the south, Marathon to the east, and Valero just over the southeast area. So if that wasn't enough for Wilmington, we're also surrounded by the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach. So in terms of air quality, as Dr. Bo was stating, LA having, some of the major impacts, Wilmington is probably, I would argue, as bad as it gets in terms of air quality. And that's because of a number of reasons, right? Not only the stationary sources that we have, but also not only Wilmington, but our entire district that stretches from Watts all the way to the LA waterfront, has the lowest tree canopy out of any district out of the 15 in the entire city of Los Angeles. So obviously, as we see temperatures rising due to climate change, our asphalt gets even hotter in the summer, and then you add the impacts of both mobile and stationary sources in the community. Sometimes just makes it unbearable to walk down the street, especially if you don't have that significant tree canopy to keep you cool. We're also one of the oldest communities in the entire city. As I mentioned, we were annexed in the early 1900s, but we're much older than that. So a lot of our infrastructure is aging. And as I mentioned earlier, the city of LA hasn't always kept its promise of all the resources that benefit the city. Wilmington, obviously, like many low-income communities, has been burdened because of that. So we do have a lot of aging infrastructure that we're slowly getting to either reconstructing or managing at the same time. But the need is so great that sometimes it feels like we're working backwards when it comes to infrastructure. Obviously, because of poor air quality, we also have high asthma rates and related health issues that have to do with poor air quality. Another portion as to why the community, the landscape, makes it inviting for a lot of industry, and that's something we'll continue to correct this day and in the last few years. And I'll mention this. I'll talk about this a little bit more in my next slide. Is the community is 40% industrial and heavy industry. As I mentioned, we have refineries, but we also have a significant amount of container yards and freight yards, including truck parking stations and things related to truck parking and container storage. And that's because in terms of land use for industrial zone properties, a lot of municipalities within the region are sort of getting away from these industrial uses, but Wilmington continues to be sort of a gold mine when it comes to industrial use, and obviously that's even more relevant when you consider the proximity of Wilmington to the port. Right, it's literally in our backyard. So that also poses significant environmental impacts because at any given time, you can drive down one of our commercial corridors and see sort of non-conforming uses of either a commercial property with very light use next to a very heavy industry property, and even in some cases residential areas next to heavy industry. So that obviously is problematic, and as I mentioned, is something we're trying to correct. Wilmington also has the largest amount of individual oil wells in the entire city. If you visit ZIMAS today, ZIMAS, which is the city's both internal and public zoning map and database, you'll see a number of red dots throughout the city. But the largest concentration of those red dots that signify oil wells are concentrated within the Wilmington community, within a 9.2 mile radius, which obviously makes it problematic. And I'll talk a little bit about them more in my next slide as well, as how we're addressing, oil drilling next to residential homes, which you can imagine not only the environmental impacts, but also the health impacts living in next door to something like this. And as I mentioned, heavy freight, which is where much of my early experience in the private sector came from. Wilmington is heavily burdened by the spillover of Port of LA, with again having a significant amount of diesel trucks that run through our community, making thousands of trips on any given day. As we've seen the volumes increase in both the Port of LA and Long Beach, that's only just exacerbated the issue here in the community. Obviously, with a lot of our residents, crying out for help, and obviously, rightfully so. But it just continues to add on a heavier burden for the community. So obviously, I painted an interesting picture of Wilmington, and as much as I love my community, I also love to be real with people as to the impact that we have, right? And we have had over the last 10 years in our administration a significant amount of wins. The city of LA, like any municipality, is bureaucratic, so you can imagine the amount of the amount of time it takes for us to really get anything done on the policy level. But as I mentioned, in terms of the individual oil drilling sites and wells that we have in the community, last year we were able to begin to explore and really put into concrete policy, beginning to phase out a lot of these oil drilling sites within the city of Los Angeles, and obviously Wilmington having the largest concentration of these oil wells would benefit, which is essentially what we're proposing is a 1,500-foot buffer between these oil drilling sites and residential areas. That's obviously much easier said than done, because part of the process of actually, reaching our goal is that a lot of these either individual property owners that actually hold what we call mineral rights to these wells need to be paid out. So in our last calculation, our petroleum administrator in our last report, which you can find on our city website in the LA Petroleum Administrator's Office, we calculated to having to pay out close to $3 billion, which will essentially bankrupt the city. So obviously, we also need to be fiscally responsible into how we're dealing with these economic impacts when we start to phase out these oil drilling sites. A second win that we've been working with the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach, what's known as the CAP or the Clean Air Action Plan, which is both the sister ports plan to go to zero or near zero emissions for semi trucks within the port complex. Again, a little bit more easier said than done, because we do have to be intentional about how we're, requiring not only large corporations that do have fleets of, diesel trucks going into the port complex, but also the mom and pops who are usually, black and brown folks who, are known as owner operators within the industry, who obviously would hurt if they are required to buy a $400,000 truck as opposed to a $50,000, $60,000 truck. So although it is good policy and we do want to reduce emissions to zero in the port, part of that responsibility, not only as government, but as a municipality, as an elected office, we have to be very intentional and careful that we don't hurt another population that relies heavily on those jobs here in our region. Because statistics show 4 out of 10 jobs within this region have to do within the port. So again, still a lot more work to do, but at least for now we have a clear goal as to when we want to reduce those emissions within the port complex. And obviously the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach being one of those stationary sources that produces high amounts of pollution within this region. Something that we were proud a few years ago is that we received a federal grant to plant over 1,000 trees in Wilmington. And as I mentioned earlier, our district in Wilmington specifically has a very low tree canopy for the entire city. So as of now, as the last 2 years, we've planted 1,000 trees, and we'll continue to plant more, again, to battle the effects of climate change. And trees are important, so encourage everyone to adopt a tree and plant one, whether it's in your backyard or in your parkway. As I mentioned, 40% of the community in Wilmington, as far as properties and zoning, is 40% industrial. So we're currently working through the community plan update, which is state mandated, and in that we're looking at these heavy industrial properties and begin to transition them into what our planning department calls hybrid industrial, which minimizes the intensity of what these properties can do. So, for example, if today a property is being used as container storage and truck storage, once this community plan is adopted by the city council, it will require a less intensity use to come in. So something like a brewery would still be considered industrial, but would have less impact in the community. And it's obviously a community serving zone. So next thing here I have is the Harbor Community Benefits Foundation. So the Harbor Community Benefits Foundation is an independent nonprofit organization that came about the Port of Los Angeles putting 1% of its annual revenue into community benefits that have to do with monetary benefits. So nonprofits are whether they're 501c3s or 501c6s, are encouraged and qualified to apply for funds that directly deal with the impacts of the port. So that includes air quality, providing green spaces, or even education and programming that will obviously just better the quality of life for our residents here in both Wilmington and San Pedro, the two communities that are impacted the most by the port complex. So that includes air filters that we're working on with the Community Benefits Foundation, as well as other mitigation dollars for to build in that aging infrastructure that I was talking about to mitigate the truck traffic. That's something that we continue to work on with this nonprofit to ensuring that we're doing our part with the Port of Los Angeles to put real dollars back into the community as part of that revenue that the port receives. Other thing is we've created green spaces. In a couple months here, we allowed a nonprofit, and by allowed I mean we provided a city-owned property that's nearly 2 acres back to a nonprofit to use for green space. So next month we're going to celebrate the opening of the Heart of the Harbor Community Farm, which will provide over 70 garden boxes for organic vegetables, fruit, as well as tree planting, mulch, and allow the community to really see the benefits of urban farms. Again, another method when it comes to green space to combating climate change and the poor air quality in the community. And some of the challenges are great. We as much as we've try to change things on the policy side, we come up with roadblocks, right? And that is usually the conversations, or really the difficult conversations we have with our partners over in our unions, right? A lot of the refineries do have union memberships, and what we've seen anytime we've introduced policy, whether it's at the city level or the councilman serving in the South Coast Air Quality Management District, it's always met with the battlefront, right? Because obviously people are usually afraid of losing their jobs, right? And as we begin to transition from fossil fuels into the blue economy to more green jobs, I think the boogeyman is always, well, what's going to happen to my job? That it's it doesn't require me to have a college degree, but it's one of the very few jobs that pays really well, right? We all want the same thing, clean air and good jobs, but I think the challenge for us here, at least at the municipal level, is seeing how we can strike a balance between the two. And it's been absolutely, to be transparent, a very difficult battle we've seen in the last few years. The other thing that I think folks love.
Fernando, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're running a little bit over time.
Okay. My apologies. I'll wrap this up. So the last two things is, although we do have authority in a lot of the things that happen here in the community, we still look to our federal and state partners to take action, right? Things like the ships that come through the Port of Los Angeles are regulated by the federal government. And even some of the freight issues that we have are regulated by the state. So we usually try to work collaboratively with our federal and state partners. But again, I think it's going to take a lot more political will to get to where we need to be if we really want to get serious about our air quality here, not only in the region, but really throughout the city of Los Angeles. And then, as I mentioned, in terms of getting to near zero or zero emissions within the Port of Los Angeles, the technology has to be affordable for communities of color, and we need to ensure that, unlike the regulations that we put forward in both the Port of LA and Long Beach in 2008, this time around,
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And the statistics that I always cite to students is that, as you said, more than 40% of the goods that come into the US and North America, I believe, actually pass through this particular this port. So in a sense, it's where this global movement of goods hits the ground and whose implications really scale down from global to local level of neighborhood. So thank you everyone for being here. I am incredibly sad that we can't have this kind of group conversation because each of you brings such a kind of distinct and unique perspective to this issue. And it just really goes to show how complex it is to talk about, not so much the topic itself of air, but its implications for climate justice. So thank you all for the work that you do. And again, I just really appreciate the time that the audience has taken to be with us today, and please feel free to reach out to each other to continue this conversation offline. Thank you.